My name is Mernaz, and I am moderating today this session on development, security, and operations working together for UW-Madison. After our opening remarks, our wonderful presenters are going to introduce themselves, and then they're going to go about the presentation. Now, after the introduction, you are more than welcome to ask your questions. This is an interactive panel, so with just one note that we will be recording this presentation, and an accessible video will be available for viewing on the IT Professionals Conference website in the coming weeks. So with that, I pass it over to the panel to start their presentation.
Starting with basic introductions, my name is Julie Johnson. I work as a security analyst in testing and cyber defense, which is part of the Office of Cybersecurity. In DevSecOps, my primary focus is on vulnerability prevention, but I also have an interest in working with developers in general. And that has taught me the value of quick change, which sometimes fits within a reasonable risk management process in security, and sometimes it does not. Learning from one another is a very important part of working together. Phil, I believe you're next.
Sure, I'll take that handoff. Thanks, Julie. My name is Phil Jochimson. I'm a DevOps engineer in WPS, and I've done a lot of web stuff over the years, and just in general, these concepts of better ways to work using DevSecOps is really what I'm excited about. I guess, let's see, I will pass off to Shrey. How about?
Thank you, Phil. So my name is Shreyash Shrestha. I'm a software engineer in the Enterprise Integration Group here in DoIT. In this group, I primarily develop integrations and APIs for the university and employ practices that DevSecOps outlines for continuous integration and continuous deployment for almost all of our applications. And like I say, this has allowed us to reliably and frequently develop production features and also react to user feedback. So yeah, I'm excited to join this panel and have a discussion around it. I think I passed off to Benjamin.
Thanks, Shrey. My name is Benjamin Souza. I'm the platform architect in the DoIT Web Platforms and Services group, which includes MyUW, WhiskWeb CMS, Web Hosting Service, Knowledge Base. And as a platform group, it's very important to us to try to incorporate DevSecOps principles as much as possible. And I also manage, as part of my role, the DoIT GitLab instance at git.doit.with.edu, which is one of the important DevSecOps tools that a lot of people in DoIT and beyond DoIT rely on. So, and happy to be here. And I will hand it off to Jared.
All right, thanks. Yeah, my name is Jared Kasanovic, and I am technical lead for our group, Enterprise Integration. I work on the same team as Shrey. We, like Shrey said, we develop APIs and integrations, and try to use a lot of DevSecOps principles in the way we do our development, as well as basic iterative design and development practices, through Agile Scrum. Yeah, it's definitely looking forward to talk more about kind of how we apply testing, analytics, and making sure we can make changes to our applications and get feedback in an iterative manner. Let's see, I think I can hand it off to Ken.
Howdy, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My name is Ken Hahn. I work for Computer-Aided Engineering, CAE, over in the engineering school. I work more on the infrastructure side of our world, kind of come at DevOps, DevSecOps from the world of ops. We had an older system, ran CF Engine and Git repos and used feature branching. And when some people left, we've been re-architecting into using something more containery, Kubernetes tied, Ansible tied, and some Terraform and various other things, if you saw the Jupyter talk earlier today. And so really trying to get more into the fast cycle side of DevSecOps, and that's kind of my background. And I don't know if I'm supposed to hand off to somebody.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Thank you very much for introduction. Now, if anybody has any questions for the panel before they jump into the content, please go ahead and put your questions in the chat or unmute and ask.
And by the way, the best content is questions from you. I mean, we all have things that we can say, but the best thing is going to be to interact with all of you.
We have one comment, great shirt, Ken. So I think that's a good start.
That's from me.
Okay, nice.
Conjunction junction.
So Julie, were you interested in doing the couple of slides that you had?
Yeah, I'll go first as soon as I bring my screen up here. One moment.
And so as Ben said, if you have questions about what is DevSecOps, or how has it been useful for us, or if you've you're here to get some more knowledge, want to hear some war stories, I mean, there are a variety of opportunities here. As I said, drop it in chat if Julie's talking here, and we'll do some unmuting later if that works.
Okay, here we go. Can you see what's wrong with this diagram? Basically, this is based on the older waterfall model of development, which assumes that requirements and design documents for an entire software project are laid out and completed before coding and implementation starts. This is how Microsoft on their TechNet presents secure development and outdated methodology. You can look further on Google, and you do find some diagrams or some illustrations of secure development that look more agile, that follow the more modern iterative design process. But unfortunately, when the site describes the steps in secure development, it still assumes a linear process rather than an iterative one. That I see as something working in security, but also cross-trained in development, can do my part to improve upon. That we can incorporate security into the development process. My dream in DevSecOps is to help developers, not to try to impose a process with gates and bug bars that interferes with the agile, lean, iterative process that contributes to success, but rather to work within that and even to learn from it. I could see places in security where that same iterative, lean, efficient process could help us, particularly when there's a 0-day or an incident response situation where we too have to change very quickly. Focusing on my personal, I wouldn't say passion, but I'd say primary technical interest of vulnerability prevention. What I say within the DevSecOps community is, let's work together. Let security people help you. And we can incorporate security into the Agile methodology. I never did find an online diagram that showed it. So I just took a very simple Agile graphic. This one came from Gantt Pro, but there's similar diagrams in many places, and just added the security steps. Start by looking, when making plans for the current sprint or putting steps on the Kanban board to know where the risks are, get input from security people, and put any security that's needed into the plan for the current sprint, rather than trying to put it into the whole project at once, which would not be agile or would not fit with most agile methodologies. Paying particular attention to parts of a project that might handle restricted data or be taking input that could be vulnerable to injection. Then, of course, build that mitigation into the design plan. Code and test, incorporate security tests. If there's a particularly sensitive area, there might be manual reviews or slower running tests, such as fuzzing, which can take time. But if the team has seen where the high risk part of the project is, they would understand those few points where they do need to wait for a slower but more thorough security test. Most of the time, tests can be fully automated just as other development tests, just like other unit tests are fully automated and incorporated into the DevOps pipeline. Release, we see one of the dreams of secure development, and that is software that is secure by design, secure by default, and secure in deployment. Completing the cycle if a vulnerability is detected, we not only want to make a patch part of a plan, but look at how the vulnerability, particularly if there was a coding error, incorporated into the blameless and supportive discussion at the end of the cycle, and see how we can avoid making the same mistake again. And then obviously continuing with subsequent iterations further along in the project. And if anyone has any questions, particularly if people from the development side see ways to improve on this, I think the biggest strength in DevSecOps is learning from each other. I listen, I have a lot to share, but I also listen. And I will be listening to the rest of the presenters as we move along here. Do we have any questions yet?
I have a question, if that's okay, Julie.
Sure.
Now, this this life cycle that you showed, is it being used here, or is it something that would be nice to have it?
I would have to ask the people in the development team what they incorporate here. The exact details vary, but that iterative design cycle is very, very common in development. And I know from meeting with DevSecOps that a form of it is widely used at UW. Do you have more to say about that from the development side, Ken?
Well, ironically, I was going to say it from the more ops of dev, right? Because there's a lot of anything I write that's custom is glue. I would say for me, it's a wished thing to a certain extent because in some respects, right now, my security guy, we had one leave and we're trying to get another one and he starts later. But the being able with the security, you know, with SecOps, the world over in a whole other land, it's not easy to integrate into our cycle per se. Although when we're iterating through things, when I had a security guy local, I was certainly bouncing things off from him in the idea, and he was certainly aware of the things that we're monitoring the system to feed back into the future development. So I absolutely agree that having security in the cycle, not for just unit testing, but also I think there's something missing also in the API side of the world of DevSecOps. I think a lot of infrastructure as code gives a lot of opportunities for APIs to be integrated so that, you know, even if even if you have that Slack channel or Teams channel full of messages automatically coming from something, it lets you see when changes are occurring. And it lets you correlate things on the other end of the world, like maybe the security guy suddenly sees that we've got a whole lot of traffic going to something we didn't before at the same time that, say, a new container was deployed or things of that sort. It would be nice to be able to integrate more with other security tools on campus at an API level, to be able to integrate those things together to be able to get even more feedback in that development cycle.
Do we have any comments on that diagram or on the use of the Agile methodology from our developers here?
Yeah, I mean, I can mention. I mean, it pretty closely aligns with how our team plans and executes the work we do. I like what you said about not doing everything in layers. Not waiting till the end to do all the security stuff. I mean, every like sprint you do, having it be a full vertical slice of all of the implementation and testing you want to do. Our team tries to accomplish that by having like small use cases we can drive towards. So all of our work is driven by those use cases, and we can start with a use case that might take a sprint, that might take 5 sprints or something, but every one of those sprints we can incorporate that cycle that you were showing, Julie. And I think that's not only a good way to make sure you're meeting the needs of the use case that you're working towards, but that you're able to get feedback on a regular basis, in all areas, from like a business owner perspective, as well as maybe like a security and like operations perspective as well.
And I would like to add, like, having good stakeholders who have a stake in the security of the application is very helpful. That the feedback loop that we get right away at the end of the cycle, and then the next sprint, you can like quickly prioritize that and work on it right away. So, and again, with the infrastructure as code, you can have control of all of that at the get-go. So it's part of your design of the application. You're not just writing code, you're basically structuring the entire infrastructure around your application at the get-go, and it's all maintained in a single repository, and you have your deployment pipelines testing it and validating that everything is correct on every changes. It's very nice to have, gives you full like assurance, and it's very reliable that you're going to make changes that's going to prove and have an impact on the end users right away, and they can see that and give you feedback as well.
If I can double dip one more thing, I also think that bill of materials is probably going to be a thing that is fitting itself into the DevSecOps, I'll get the right phrase eventually, cycle. Simply because right now, some of the times when you know that there's security issues, you don't have a way to tie it backwards. And I think some of the tools are kind of coming forward. I noticed like a lot of the corporate stuff is much more worried about licensing of each layer inside of the components that are built. But I think certainly knowing, for example, this container comes from this base, which includes this distribution and these packages, and it has these libraries. The more of that kind of thing that is able to happen, supply, that's another name in that world, software supply chain security things. The more we can put that together, once again, using the integration to allow for like, when a tool from somewhere else fires off like a CVE, we're able to go back and just have that instantly into the checks going on in unit testing to say, okay, do we have things in the bill of materials here, for our components that fit this problem?
I'd add to that something that we're currently working on with Do It Cybersecurity, which is trying to get container scanning at rest for containers put into a specific registry, or really hopefully any of our main registries, for exactly that kind of reason. Because in at least, I remember being developing applications at a time when saying, okay, well, now we need to think about security, just kind of felt like, oh my God, now you just doubled the amount of time and energy and development that's going to go into this project. And that's where security immediately starts falling off as part of the development process. And so we're trying to make security an integral part of the process. You're going to push that container to a registry at some point, and that would be the time to scan it so that that developer can have confidence if there's something nasty in that container, someone is going to identify that and let me know about it. So that would be an example of trying to make security an integral and easy part of the process.
And I'll jump on that one too to say that, yes, can't have a presentation without cats. Cats on the internet. To jump on there and say that with some of the software testing stuff I've done in the past, we just kept repeatedly finding these graphs where they try to explain that the time to fix a bug, in order to fix a bug that's in production already is like the most expensive time to find it and fix it, right? You've already written the code, you think you've done all your testing, all that kind of stuff, which was again a very waterfall kind of approach. But same thing, even if you did an agile software development without security baked in, finding out that you have a security fix or a security bug, if you will, super late, it's already deployed, it's very expensive to fix it at that point. The registry thing's a great example. There's some awesome other kind of cultural side effects too, which is that if you can say, we got this registry set up and it's going to auto scan anything that comes in, any new containers that come into it, for example, I don't have to learn how to install and configure a registry scanning tool or run my own registry. I can just consume something that actually gives me some information immediately, flags it, however we go about that. And things like that, just like how, developers being able to put, not only syntax checking stuff in their IDEs, but also some of these tools that can do a little bit of security checking, or even some of that bill of materials while you add libraries to your project. Those are super awesome because, if you get that in the first 5 minutes, 5 hours of working on your project, it's so much less expensive and so much easier to shift and change directions than it is if you're 50 hours in or 500 hours in.
Yeah, I think as you all are going through that, I mean, it makes me think, not to go philosophical, but it's kind of just all about making it hard to do the wrong thing, making a really safe environment for developers. I mean, there's I don't know if anyone has read the DevOps handbook, but they made a corollary to Toyota manufacturing, how when Toyota started measuring the safety of their employees, on the manufacturing floor, they ended up being way more productive, and they were able to produce more cars because they're optimizing for the safety of their employees. I think a similar thing can be said in development. When you make it really safe and easy to make changes, if you implement the wrong thing, maybe you violate an expectation of security, or maybe you violate an expectation of the business owner that's wanting to implement an application or something. If you can get that feedback really fast that, hey, you did something wrong, take a look at this, that creates a really safe environment for developers to do the right thing and prevent that production mistake that you might find 3 months later and have to lift everything up to fix.
That was a great analogy with the Toyota stuff, bringing it into, and there's a lot of things about lean, the Toyota production process versus even just how the American car companies had originally made cars for the longest time. I think some of the great examples are things like, the most expensive time for GM to discover that the door doesn't fit on the car because the welds weren't right is when the thing is literally rolling out the last step at the door of the plant. That is the most expensive time to find it. And the Toyota one does some other cultural things, which again, is widely adopted in a lot of places at this point, probably including GM. But the second someone noticed that the door didn't fit like it was supposed to because the weld was wrong, would probably happen immediately after the weld was done. And any worker has an ability to pull the andon cord to stop the entire production of the entire plant for as long as necessary to fix that problem and fix the problem that caused the problem. And being able to do that, it's safe to fail. In fact, they will get mad at you if you didn't pull the cord and you saw the problem, right? So we got some awesome things with software where we don't have to physically move things around, but we can have security checks automated that pull the cord and say, no, you can't deploy that. And Like I don't have to go and independently inspect the line of code to discover that there's a problem. I can have something do it for me.
Right, Phil. And that, if that were universally implemented, that would make life so much easier for security and make a drastic impact in the number of data breaches that are happening in the world today. What happens once it goes out into production, even if you fix a flaw on the next iteration, there are people that won't patch it. So once it's been out in production, getting the fix all the way to the vulnerable endpoint is an area that security and operations have a lot of work to do on in many parts of the tech world. I'm not saying UW specifically, but wherever there is technology. So many data breaches that we hear about on the news could have been prevented either with a timely patch or preferably if it had been caught before it got out into production. As Phil was saying, an automated system that says you can't deploy that. Thank you, Phil.
And I think I've got our first very specific question, which we'll hear from you folks. What tools are in place to automate security checks today? So Blake asks us that question. I can think of a few, but I'll start with a few then to partially answer your question, Blake. The things I think about are stuff like on endpoints, and I'm going to specifically talk about in this case a laptop or a desktop. We've got things like antivirus in place. There are network protections that we get from things like Palo Alto and some other firewall rules or firewall devices that do some of that kind of checking and sort of like it's possible to get an alert that a host appears to be acting like it's been compromised, for example. So some sort of intrusion detection kind of things at the network level there. And then that antivirus kind of stuff checks to see whether or not it thinks there's not so great processes running. That doesn't address servers exactly. Servers are a little bit different ball of wax. Antivirus looks and feels a little bit different than it does on a desktop. As far as what's in place for people developing code to push it out, right now, just as UW with the decentralized nature, anybody does whatever they want. So if your team has chosen to do some kind of automated security checking, you've got it. If you have chosen to not do that step, then you don't have it. Obviously, some of the things we've mentioned are on our wish list of we want to, as Jared said, like make it so easy to do the right thing that doing the less ideal thing is actually hard to do. And so anything we can do to just grease the wheels to make stuff easy is good. Rest of the panel, do you have any other examples of automated security checks?
Yeah, I mean, like for application deployment, I mean, of course, testing, right? Testing rigorously. We're adding a lot of unit tests, integration tests that covers all of your code, covers all the security things. That's like a given that runs on every deployment pipeline that you're on there. Like I would say static code analysis tools that you can run as part of your pipeline as well that can detect things that are out of date or packages that you're using that have vulnerabilities in it that can, fail the pipeline right away without pushing it any further. If you're deploying things in containers, the Qualys Secure Agent or Security Scanner, I believe, is another tool that you can use. But yeah, I believe there are a lot of like code analysis tools out there that you can utilize in your deployment pipelines.
Does anybody know, I'll ask a question. Does anybody know if Swamp is still a thing on campus? And if we've got any CI steps going into the Swamp, which was that was the software assurance marketplace that was run out of WID. I guess I still see the website for it, but I don't know if anybody on campus was taking advantage of them for analyzing code.
That is an excellent question. We definitely had the folks who did this. They did present a couple of years ago at IT ProConf.
Jennifer's saying in the chat, Jennifer Kuo seems to say swamp is not a thing anymore. Interesting, kind of sad in a way, because I know they had some static analysis built into it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of things in container land where like they'll do static analysis of built containers, right? Whether you have the Qualys agent that I think Brian Hill gave a talk on a couple IT Pro Conts ago, to if you put containers in Quay, I think there's a scan that can happen automatically that way. There's for pay ones of this as well. I'm sort of interested, as I say, also in the other end of it, just being able to keep track of all my components. I've been thinking so much, haven't gone there yet, but like simply being that software bill of materials aspect for me is a thing, because I was thinking maybe at the same time that I'm building my container, I might also make a release artifact that would contain the software bill of material so that I could build things in the API that would automatically be able to look at my containers that are deployed in Kubernetes and then match that up with the bill of materials. And then I'm looking for things that feed us those sort of CVEs out in the world. We, in our own local setup for a long time, we use Debian Linux, which has Debian security alerts that has CVEs in them. And we were able to correlate that with what's running on boxes. Now, I think out of some of the pre-built components that exist now, Qualys can do, the Qualys agent can do some of this, but once again, you got to have the API access in order to make the tools go together to automatically go, okay, upgrade all these, and have it not be, to have it be more automatic and get it into that agile cycle once again.
I think we missed Ryan's comment about blocking deployments can be tricky. That is something we encounter in security and obviously in development as well. That if you've got an automated system that stops, that it can stop at a time when it would be better to say go. So yes, having someone with the authority to, as Ryan said, break the glass and let it deploy. Certainly a man in the loop is a good, or a person in the loop, I should say, forgive me there, is a good thing. But that person has to be very careful and understand risk versus what needs to be, the reason they're making the override, is it worth the risk, is a question that person should always ask before they quote unquote break the glass. With the Log4j, we know a number of things that could happen there if they did deploy it, and that perhaps, depending on what is already out there and the overall risk picture, maybe it's better not to deploy or not, depends on the circumstances.
There's sort of a continuum here too, which is that if you start with life as everything manual, and you want to work towards getting things like pipelines and automated scanning, you don't automate everything. You don't switch from full manual to full automated the same day. Just like how some teams will go for quite a while with a manual production deployment, but we've managed to be able to do like dev or QA or something like that in an automated fashion. That manual deployment, of course, doesn't have this issue because you have the human deciding about when something can go. But yeah, it's an interesting concern, right? If you automate all the things and you say, hey, you should never deploy a known vulnerable thing, you got to have some kind of a way out in the event that there is no fix for the vulnerable thing, but you did want to know about it. And can you do some other mitigation, which actually means for a short period of time, it's okay for me to run with that thing out there, because otherwise the app's down. And that's sort of the other side effect there.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about, is having some kind of variable in the CI/CD process that you could introduce if you were saying, pass these, regardless of whether everything in that stage of CI/CD checks all the boxes. I need you to pass it anyway. Yeah, and I'll pick up on just one thing that Justin said earlier, which is about GitLab CI having scanning built in. That's true of a fair number of modern CI/CD tools, is that they have some degree of scanning built into them, whether it's static scanning, code coverage scanning, dynamic application scanning, that you can plug in, and your mileage may vary. So it will depend, what developers really need and what security really needs, whether those built-ins will be enough, but it's becoming increasingly common that that's part of a tool that you would be able to use for all of your CI/CD.
I might just touch on the question that Ken asked in the chat, actually, about secrets management. I guess I can provide my experience, which is I feel secrets management has gotten easier the more we fully integrate into using cloud platforms like Amazon or Google Cloud Platform. For example, like TLS certificates, like, we used to have to maintain private keys and maintain those ourselves. But then using like Amazon Certificate Manager, we don't really have to worry about that. So in our CI/CD pipeline, when we have like Terraform deploy an application that might, have a certificate and other components in Amazon, those can just reference each other inside of the code instead of needing to, store any sort of secret out of band or in another location. So I guess that's what I'll offer. I think just the more we've fully integrated into, a cloud platform for a given application, the easier secrets management seems to be, which is helpful.
And that's the key is private key is a very specific type of secret. There's also a bunch of opportunities with, I've got my example from Amazon of the Amazon Secrets Manager, which is, it's referenceable from inside of AWS with an API to go get something. There's definitely some examples with the WhiskWeb team that I'm on where that's what it does, right? We don't store the secret in GitLab even. We have the code get deployed to Amazon, and then we tell Amazon, hey, go get that thing out of Secrets Manager in Amazon. And there's some opportunities like that for these smaller services that the cloud providers have, where you're consuming, again, infrastructure as a service. They had one for secrets management, and that could be, again, anything from like a private key to an actual password and username. Without me having to install and configure and run a secrets management thing. There's also, as mentioned, the opportunity in GitLab to inject secrets during deployment or when a pipeline runs. So those things can be obfuscated from source code view, so you're not saving the password in plain text source code, but it gets added when deployment occurs.
I think part of what made me originally think to ask that question was when we were talking about break the glass in a different context. I sort of tried to go advanced early and then backed off because only so much support. Early on, I tried installing HashiCorp Vault for things locally, and then said, wow, this is a lot to manage for like one guy just figuring things out. And I actually found for like the easiest, number one, because I'm using kube, right? So there is a concept of a secret as a first, it's an object that's like first class. But then for instructions along with what I'm putting in GitLab for deploying things, I'm using the command line LastPass to simply be able to grab the secrets out of LastPass and to stick it into the secrets in Kubernetes. And that's been like a good first level way of doing it, right? I know there are much better things. It also platform independent, since from my perspective at the UW LastPass, everybody has it, especially when I'm trying to be cross-platform and can't guaranteed, or I'm sorry, cross-group, and I can't guarantee that everybody's got the same access to the same things. But yeah, that doesn't get you the kind of thing that Vault has, where like they have sidecars that are involved so that you can make a decision to hit a button like, oh, something's wrong with this service. All passwords for this now are invalid, and everything just locks down. But yeah, it's a worthwhile thing. And I guess I would also say +1 to earlier the discussion about being able to mitigate and pass things through, right? Log4j certainly was the example where patch after patch after patch came, and you weren't really sure if things were going to mitigate, even if you were patched up all the way. And so in kube for me, that meant taking my Java items and then going into network policy for pods and basically closing down everything except for the minimal things that I knew that the service needed, because that allowed me as a mitigation step to know that even if somehow it got injected, nothing would be able to reach out and grab the next part of things. And I think that's kind of a thing we need to think of when we do MVP from the beginning, is that minimal viable product should also have minimal viable access, right? And it'll get in your way, and then in the cycle, you'll discover, oh, I need to open this port, or I need to do this in order to, oh gosh, DNS is important for a service, right? Didn't think about the fact I need to have that port open, right? But nonetheless, starting off with like everything restricted kind of sucks a little, but I think the more you can do in the dev cycle, the better to hit those things, and then you know what your externalities really are. I think a thing that I've been wondering about myself, because once again, I'm using a lot of the pre-existing components that are out there and doing more glue, as opposed to I've only had a couple containers that I've done more of the development direct on. How many people are taking the same tests that they're putting in their CI pipeline and also trying to bring them into local commit shims so that they can not have to wait for the pipeline to identify the problems? Just because also I'm worried about, people breaking the build kind of thing.
Great question.
Yeah.
I mean, I can mention, that's been something I've been maybe interested in getting into a little more. All of our tests run in GitLab, and we can also run those locally. So I guess, we could do something like that, but sometimes it is helpful just to have it in a central place like GitLab. Like, let's say if someone ran into an error with a test, like they can just send me a link to the log in GitLab. I can help them out. So I think it is better to collaborate on problems like that, but maybe for some like lower level, quick, like maybe linting type tests, like, yeah, I could see how that would make sense as being more on the, like as a commit shim, like you mentioned.
Ken, so maybe another idea, I just thought about this too, is that there are a variety of, there's some of the lighter weight tools. I think linting is a great example of one that can be run kind of anywhere, that they're already sort of small and don't, I don't have to go download 7,000 definitions of something just to get some value, some quick value out of stuff. There is, as I think Jared's kind of getting to also, is that when you sort of commit to the model of using pipelines, there are aspects of like, we may want to stagger how our tests are done. So we're not just like, I make a single, 2-second change to code, and now I've got 15 minutes of tests that run before anybody knows if it's sort of okay. It's kind of a problem, right? To try to do this stuff asynchronously. And I see what you're getting at with kind of trying to get that feedback even sooner.
Yeah, it just seems like taking up the runners and taking the time to do that when a linter could be like run in the local hooks. Yeah, I've been thinking about this with Docker containers as well, and Lord knows for kube people even deploy I forget what the name of it is, kube in Docker kind, in order to simulate. Right, there's also a tier of like, okay, if you're testing things that you only need to think about the container, don't bother trying to run kind. But if you're testing things about how it deploys in kube, then you may have to, like, in your test setup, make the mini kube to test it out. And certainly the more that I could catch that early on the local machine, so that I could think about more things that need to be centralized, like the security checks that I might not be updating the database on, but something else might, I think the better.
Steve had an interesting comment before. Not sure if that's a full question or not, Steve, if you want to unmute to talk about it, but just a quick summarize. You mentioned that part of, one of the ideas with DevOps or DevSecOps is that the person who wrote the code is the person who runs the code, which also means they're the one who can, they can fix the thing. They also find out about the things broken. And they own the problem from beginning to end. That's a really good way to say it. And he said, as listening to this, thinking that it seems like language is still a lot specialist as dev plus sec plus ops, as opposed to an integrated DevSecOps. We're just cramming acronyms together.
Yeah, I mean, that gets a little bit weird when you're into pre-existing components, as I say. Like, say you're going to go use a Prometheus operator, which is containerized, right? You're pulling that from community. So certainly you want to feed back into the community, but you're not so DevSecOps that you're bringing that in. But certainly you're the author of the integration that is going through and deploying that setup. So I get where, like, yeah, it's nice if it can go all the way, but I think when you're going to use external components, it suffices to say you can't quite get all the way from dev to the deploy.
I think one thing that I certainly agree with Ken on this, but I think one thing I could add is that looking toward a fully integrated approach, one thing that I see is very helpful going forward in IT, not only at UW, but as a greater IT community, is having a few people that take the time to get cross-trained in more than one area. That's very expensive, requires a lot of commitment on these people's parts, especially because it will likely have become at the expense of further training in their main specialty. As an example, myself, I'm completing a second program in development so that I will be cross-trained in dev and sec, and that comes at the expense of more advanced security training. But at the same time, fully integrating DevSecOps does require a few people that have skills in more than one area. And that should, at least for people that have an interest in more than one area, be encouraged.
So Steve, I think I might have saw you unmute. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, a lot of it wasn't about the particulars of the kind of some of the technical details, but I was noticing, when I talk to DevOps people, they get some people who are more DevZops people and more who are DevZops people, right? And, and the idea is that at some point, right, there's a lot of problems that get thrown over the fence into ops by the developers because they don't feel the pain, right? They don't have, so what do we do in ops? We write a bunch of scripts and we hack things together and we do this, and it kind of creates this thing. So by sitting down and saying, hey, we combine them, then when the developers have to actually experience the pain of running their software, they fix it. And concurrently, people who are doing operations work, if they have the skill set, might also be able to say, hey, wait a minute, this is something we can roll in and we can get fixed, without having, to undertake a development cycle. And, a lot of the language that I was hearing here, it just struck me as, well, we have the security people and then they can look and run a thing on this. And we have the ops people and they're kind of doing these things, and the devs are sort of doing this. And so it hasn't come to the point yet where we can say, okay, we're really sort of fully integrating all of that. So I was just wondering if that's just going to be a fact of our existence. I mean, trying to get a person who can cover that much ground, or even a set of people, is really difficult. Is that sort of an artifact or just the way the landscape's going to be, or are there indications that maybe it is moving to a more holistic level?
I would have to defer to the ops people when we get to the you build it, you run it questions. But I could say from a security perspective that having a security person at the table, a part of Scrum, helping to define the requirements, and fluent in both development and security language is a part of bringing things together in full integration, as Steve said. Jared, I see you've got your hand up.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's a good question. Just wanted to offer my perspective too. I think I think this kind of goes back to what Ken was talking about having APIs to make these processes way easier. Because I think the more we can depend on reusable components, the more like a single team can have a full vertical slice of like an application or a system or a project or whatever they're doing, and not have to, and be able to, they can specialize in DevSec and Ops because, they can rely on, other groups that are providing reusable components that help them take care of that. So an example is most of the stuff that our team deploys is on either Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, because they take care of a lot of the generic infrastructure for us. We want to focus on, our group is in Do It. Our group is a very administrative group, so we really don't have much competitive advantage to like deploy things on-prem, which is why we use the cloud so much. But that's the cloud, like using Amazon and Google Cloud allows us to have, be fully integrated, because we can focus on fewer things. We can focus on the things that only we can do, and not the things that we can outsource to, Amazon or Google or whatever platform. So I think like the more we can have reusable components, the more a team can be fully integrated in the whole DevSecOps pipeline.
I think it's probably a snare and a delusion to think that with all the complexity that we have, that we're not going to have specialization. I think that your pizza team aspect of like the pizza team of developers is going to need to change to maybe a team that's more that's made up of people. It's actually kind of one of the things I get a little bit annoyed with campus in general, is that our silos are divided the way they are. I'd rather have the security people scattered around, so the pizza team might have somebody who's more ops, somebody who's more dev, somebody who's more security, so that as you're developing, right? We've talked about how here in the cycle you need to get that feedback from all of them. There's a certain amount of conservation of complexity that is never going to go away. No matter what you change to one other system, it's still going to be a certain level of complex. And being able to specialize, right? Once upon a time, I could know most everything happening in my Commodore 64. I can't know everything that's happening in the modern PC, right? And I think the same thing is going to happen to DevSec and Ops. I agree. It's probably more of a team of people specializing that can integrate together, and they're going to learn more about each other in the process, right? And my background, right, I've been more opsy around here for a while. And before that, I had the master's in CS and did my first 7 years doing software development for like desktop. I wrote CD burning software, right? So even there, I worked with my people who were making my MSI installers so that we could do, so that, the way that it was deployed on the machine made a lot of sense with how we were organizing things like where stuff was in registries and all that kind of thing. And so I really do believe in this idea of cross-discipline teams as the future way. Does that kind of get to what you're thinking, Steve?
Yeah, I think that talks about it, right? That's the real challenge. One of the other things as well is it, as you start integrating some of those things, it also, people have to think a little bit more about what they're asking for one way or the other, right? So instead of saying, hey, wait a minute, oh, go fix this, right? If the burden then falls on them to fix it, not just to tell someone else to fix it, then they have to think a little more about whether it's worth it to address this. Is it that important or is it not? It helps with some of that assessment as well. Or, hey, I noticed this has been a big problem for me, so now I can go fix it and save everybody time and trouble. But yeah, I have to agree, though. I think, there will be degrees of specialization. It's just a question of whether we view the team of specialists as a whole of having to deal with this, or whether it's still discrete teams that have a defined interface and they throw things back and forth over the wall. That's the distinction, I guess, I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and I think that that team part is one of the only ways to fight against that old structure of separate DevSecOps. And so I think one of the little things that we can all keep in mind as a warning sign is if you can ever say that there's some projects that is so-and-so's project, then something's wrong, because fundamentally the idea is there should be multiple eyes on everything that you're doing, because of that fact that there's no way that one person, as Ken said, is going to be able to understand and encompass all of the things that would go into what we would like to see in that beginning to end process.
Hey, I should mention, because it was just broadcast that we're at the 5-minute warning. This group probably should advocate for contact for how to get into the DevSecOps group that exists on campus, because I think one of the benefits of that group has been cross-pollination, at least just in talking. I mean, I admittedly have said to others, I go to some meetings and I feel it's useless, and then I go out to the meetings and other meetings I'm like, these are fantastic. So it's going to be hit and miss, but I think at the very least, showing up to those every now and then and getting some of the cross-pollination between the groups, even though we're siloed the way we are, I think it's a worthwhile thing. I don't know if somebody wants to like dump the stuff into the chat for how to get a hold and get into those meetings.
Yeah, we'll totally do that.
Probably do that.
I'm gonna jump in here also just as my one slide here to share that the wall of confusion talks a little bit about what Steve had mentioned. I got this from the DevOps Days thing that I attended here in Madison a couple of years back. Like every single presentation had a picture of this, where the incentivization for development traditionally has been features or new requests for customers and end users, and that ops is like uptime, right? The stability thing. And to get them both to realize that there shouldn't be a wall there, you are actually working for the same people, and it is possible that your job is actually organized to incentivize non-collaborative behavior. So knowing that a team of people that they want the customer to have stability and the new features, that's really key for that. And I think this picture at least is my easiest way to try to quick show people like, hey, here's what we're not trying to do. We're not trying to have people sit on another side of a wall where they don't have enough information. APIs, as mentioned previously, is an awesome way. If we've got a good boundary that an API can help us with, there might be some really great ways for us to actually do that communication, and still avoid some of this confusion part. I'm going to stop and I'm going to go drop in that link. Someone else take it away.
Does anybody else have any questions? We have like less than 2 minutes, but if there are any questions, these were really good discussions. It was really good. I learned a lot from it by just sitting there and watching and listening. This is a very nice slide too. Any questions?
Yeah, as people are maybe thinking of questions, I'll just say thanks for all the other questions. I feel like sometimes these kind of discussions can just dive into specific technologies. I know I'm the one that kept mentioning Amazon and Google, but besides that, I think like these discussions can often get into like specific technologies where I feel like we've been more at the process and the team and the people level. And I think sometimes, that's under discussed. So I appreciate that that's kind of more the direction we went here.
I agree with Jared here. I think the most important element in SecDevOps is, as it's been said before, cross-pollination. Listening to one another, respecting one another, and learning from one another.
Very wise. No, that's good. It's Phil has shared a link in the chat on how to joining DevSecOps at UW-Madison. So if interested, check that out. Other than that, we ran out of time. We don't have more time for questions, but you can reach out to our presenters if you like. Also, many thanks to our panelists as well as people who attended today. This was a great session, and stay around to attend the other great sessions that are there. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.